Not the house of cards that falls down easily. I'm strong enough to handle what you throw at me.
Mental Health News Radio, produced by MHNRnetwork.com, your source for information about our favorite subject, mental health. This show is brought to you by our incredible sponsors like ZenCharts.com, the intelligent EHR for addiction treatment organizations, and MyGenetics, that's MyGenetx.com, changing the way people are diagnosed and treated around the world, helping you better understand what makes you well. Don't you want information about yourself that empowers your mental health treatment? Also, who is minding the store, the finances of your behavioral health organization? TriadicLLC.com, that's TriadicLLC.com, is a full-service revenue cycle management and billing company focused on all the ins and outs of mental health billing. Our sponsors help keep this show on the air and advocating for everyone affected by mental health. Guess who that is? Everyone in the world. Take a listen to our show all the way to the end. You don't want to miss Miles the Therapy Dog's special goodbye. Hey everyone, this is Kristen Sananta-Walker, host of Mental Health News Radio, and I am here with a soon-to-be new podcaster on the network, Adam Clark, who has also been a guest on our show in the past. Adam, thanks so much for coming back on.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Of course. Now, we talked about doing a show about what it means to be a sensitive and extremely empathetic and empathic male. And I thought it was so awesome that you immediately said, yeah, heck, I'll do that show.
Yeah. Boy, it gets me into trouble. I'll tell you that.
Yeah. So explain, I know that there's all kinds of cultural things around that can make it difficult for men like you to be who you are. So explain to me what you mean though, and our listeners by it gets you into trouble.
Yeah. So I think it started actually growing up. And when I was in high school, I was kind of pictured and put into this label box of, oh, he must be gay. And he must be gay because he's showing these signs of empathy and feminism and sensitivity that, according to cultural aspects, is their feminine characteristics or their gay characteristics. And to me, I struggled with that because I'm like, well, I don't believe I identify as that. And that's a whole other conversation about, gender fluidity.
Yes.
But it really taught me a lot about what gender roles, tell you how you're supposed to be. It's okay for a male to act aggressive. It's okay for a male to not show emotion. But if you show emotion, if you're sensitive, empathetic, you must be gay.
Right.
So it's interesting that we automatically jump into those boxes. So I had to really think about it even then. And right now, Brene Brown and The Power of Vulnerability is really popular. And I struggled with that because I'm like, wait, what do you mean everybody isn't vulnerable or they struggle with vulnerability? Because to me, that's the thing that comes forward first, even if it gets me hurt. And it does get me hurt, but it comes into play, being a therapist and surrounding myself with very empathetic people. It's a very positive, powerful motivator as well.
It is. And that's interesting because you strike me as someone who, if you were gay, you would say, hey, I'm gay. And there's no issue around that for you.
No, absolutely. And I think it's a real positive, to be put into this box. Well, oh, okay, you're gay. So only gay men can be a positive personality and empathetic and sensitive. And it's like, well, okay, cool. You can think what you want to think. That's not offensive to me at all.
And it's funny. I mean, I have no biases or anything around that either. And because I'm a very independent female, I'm not real frou-frou in how I dress or anything like that. I get put in, and I can be very strong. I run my own company. I always have. I get put into the, oh, she must be a lesbian category, not all the time, but often. And I always think that is so fascinating how we get stereotyped into things, because again, if I was, I would have no problem saying that I am. And why is it that just because I'm very independent and don't need a running list of boyfriends all the time, do I get put into that category? So it's all fascinating how that happens. But that toughness that people attribute to me is where they put me in that category. And with you, it's the sensitivity.
Absolutely. And I've had to learn, even from a young age. My mother always told me a story when I was young. I would express emotion and say to her, my heart hurts.
Mm.
And I didn't know how to express that emotion. And I realized as I've grown, and I just recently had a significant relationship, and that the individual I was with didn't have the level of emotional spectrum as I had. And so it's really a blessing and a curse, because you can feel things deeper. You can empathize much more deeply, but it then causes you a lot more pain than someone might say, well, okay, it is what it is, move on and get over it, which comes into play, in positive and negative ways, being a grief counselor as well. So
yeah, tell our listeners, so they have an idea, anyone that, didn't hear your earlier show, what is it that you do that's your quote unquote job?
Yeah, good question. I have my hands on a lot of things. So right now I'm a director of a small hospice. So I work with the social workers and the support team there on the human side of things. But one of my biggest passions is animals. And I am trained as an animal assisted therapist and had an equine practice, but also serve as a pet loss and bereavement counselor and consultant. So I write for Psychology Today all about animal attachment and pet loss, and really dive into what is the attachment, which kind of segues into the upcoming podcast. And talking about animals and why are we attached to them and where does that drive come from. So have my hands in a couple different areas.
Just a few. Well, if you don't mind sharing, and you certainly don't have to, but what is your age range? 20s, 30s, 40s?
Yeah, late 20s, early 30s.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay, gotcha. I'm in my late 40s. I'll actually be 48 in January, and I'm so excited to get to my 50s. I'm just...
Are you?
Yeah, because there's just, for women, I think there's a lot of things that you, and it's probably for men too, but I feel like there's a lot of letting go of how you are supposed to be, how society tells you you're supposed to be, and there's a much more of a relaxing into, you know what, let's forget all that. This is who I am. I like myself, flaws and all, and it's a really throwing off of I'm just going to take all that, what society says I'm supposed to be as a female, and really not care about it anymore.
Yeah, that's great. I wish I was there, man. The pressure. My birthday is this month, actually, 4 days after Christmas. So, in my age range, it's kind of like you should be married and having kids, or you should be doing this. They're shooting all over.
Yeah.
And when your dreams and goals don't meet those cultural expectations, you kind of struggle. I know a lot of my colleagues and friends that life hasn't turned out the way that they expected. And so it's readjusting, where do I want to be for the next decade, and everything that's going on in the political climate. And it just feels like a lot of pressure. So maybe if I got fast forwarded to 50, I would feel a lot better. We say in hospice, people keep living until the moment they die. So there's always going to be struggles. But what you said actually just reminded me of something that I've kind of been thinking about more now is I read a quote, and I don't know where it was from, but the quote said, "Time doesn't heal all wounds. Intention heals all wounds. Time makes the pain less, but your intention is what heals it." And I really just sat in my chair and doing a lot of grief work with, animals and humans, where you hear that, oh, just give it time. Or, for example, with my recent ending of a lasting relationship, it was, just give it time. It'll feel better. And I know people where time doesn't help. Time might take the edge off. But for instance, if you lose a loved one, time doesn't change that. But then I really thought about intention, your intention to move through the pain, your intention to become a different person. Not that you have to let go of whatever you've lost, but that really struck me. And so, two themes in my life right now are thinking about intention and then courageous love. The world needs a lot more love right now. So.
Oh, talk to us about that. Courageous love. What does that mean? What's the definition of that right now? Because I'm sure that will change.
Oh, gosh.
But what is it now for you?
Okay, no pressure on that one. Yeah. I think a lot of times it's so easy to see, to become angry when you feel wronged, or when your expectations aren't met, or when you lose something that was significant, is that this is not how it's supposed to be, and we can become bitter or want someone to be in pain. Or if we don't want the other person, we can sometimes try to beat ourselves up and try to cause ourselves to be in that pain, as, you deserve this type of mentality.
Right.
And I think courageous loving for some, and for a lot of people, it's getting out of bed every day and trying the best you can to be the best version of yourself. And if you fail one day, loving yourself enough to do it again. And it's treating people without expectation. And I really try to, in my personal life, leave people better than how I found them. And that's one of the drives that led me to be a therapist. And I'm learning that we can't fix issues, but we can be a space where people can feel a little bit better themselves and kind of be that light. And that's one of my regrets with, let's say, relationships ending. And if you don't talk to them, you never know, did I leave them better or do they feel hurt?
Right.
So yeah, courageous love is just this messy experience of life where instead of getting road rage when somebody cuts me off, I try to say, you know what? I don't know that situation. I'm just going to breathe and I'm going to love them. I'm going to love me. I'm going to just focus on my friends and my life and live it to the fullest. Yeah.
Yeah. What do you think about things like this? Okay. Let's say you, this may not be your experience. I happen to grow up in a very toxic environment. So the people that I learned about love from were not healthy people, a lot of mental illness and personality disorders and things like that. So I did have a lifetime of being around very toxic people, and I could be toxic myself because that's all I knew. And as I got older and did more counseling, the real me, which is a very much an optimist and very loving and so on, has been able to come out and flower. And I've been able to, say no to those toxic relationships because now I have proof by the great friends and relationships I have now that life doesn't need to be like that, even though that was what I thought was normal. I have all these examples of what a really loving life can be like as an adult because of the work that I did to get there. But the point of that is, have you, in you saying, you want to leave people better than after their experience with you. I know in your work, that's what you're supposed to do, but let's take that to your personal life. Let's say you do get involved with someone and it ends up being an unhealthy relationship for you. And maybe it was a painful exit. You feel betrayed or whatever the reason. Maybe it wasn't such a loving exit. Do you ever think, okay, this doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel super positive in the leaving. And there was nothing I could do about that. But maybe that's what they needed to have happen in order for their growth too.
Yeah. So you touched on some real powerful points, I think. So just real quickly, I'll talk about upbringing, and thank you for sharing that. My upbringing has been a struggle for me to process what that looked like. And I always have felt like I wish my parents had done more in this or in that. But I also have learned that I didn't know how to handle my emotions, my empathy, my sensitivity. So it came out pretty dysfunctional. And I don't think my parents quite knew either. So it's taken a long time and a journey for me of finding myself to be that optimistic person. But all those points that you've talked about, just for an example of my past relationship, to be very professional, I'll quote from a fantastic movie of Mrs. Doubtfire, where there is one moment where she says, I just didn't like who I was when I was with him. And that's a really powerful point because looking back, for example, at my last relationship and that ending, I was angry and I was bitter and I was not loving myself or loving people because it was so exhausting trying to make something that just wasn't going to work.
Right.
And there were, to me, a lot of positives in it and a lot of beautiful experiences. But the ending was something that is excruciatingly painful, as most endings typically are. But as the time goes on, I've learned a lot and I've learned who I don't want to be. And those regrets are what hit me the most because I wouldn't want this person thinking, well, they're a jerk or this was horrible. It was a waste of time. This was a mistake. I hope in my heart that they go on this journey themselves and can say, I've learned and I've grown and I know who I want to be and don't want to be. And in grief counseling and in talking to colleagues and friends, we can kind of stop ourselves from moving through an experience, because if we don't feel the pain, it wasn't real. Or what if they fall in love with somebody else? Does that mean my love with them didn't matter? And one of the things that I hold deep down that I've learned over my life through our experiences of having different partners or different family members or chosen family is that we never can love someone in the same way. So yes, they might, and I hope they do, find someone amazing and is treated incredible and is so happy and shares that love. But I can always hold on to the fact that the good parts about the love that we shared will never be changed. That always will happen, because we never love a person the same way, because it's so different. So that, and then there's areas of growth there, for me, and, red flags of, well, if you were becoming more bitter and angry and couldn't name it, why were you ignoring that? Why wouldn't you really look at that? But I wouldn't regret any experiences. I think that builds us to who we are and launches us into a new phase if we choose, if we go down that road.
Yeah, that's so true. I can look back at some pretty toxic relationships, not a ton, but a few that were just, wow, very, very toxic. And I'm so glad I got out of them. And I know it hurt the person that I was engaged in when I finally said, I'm done, like I'm out. I don't want any contact. We're done. But yeah, I can even look at those and see there were, there were some good, loving, wonderful moments, but they weren't sustainable. And sometimes you do have to forgive yourself, because sometimes that insustainability, yes, of course, you can't keep sustaining it because you're not willing to be in an unhealthy relationship. So there was no way it was going to be sustained without you completely losing yourself and becoming something you don't, less of yourself in order to take that relationship. But you also have to give yourself a pass. Hey, you know what? I'm choosing me. I am choosing me and my happiness and my self-care and my self-love to leave this unhealthy relationship. And I'm sorry that that's hurting this other person, but maybe that's what they need in order to grow.
Right. And that's, I think, where the empathy comes in. And in this case, my partner is the one that kind of said, nope, I don't think this is working, and did it in a way that was really hurtful. But I also know that we do the best we can with who we are at the moment.
Right.
So trusting that. And for me, a huge grief and loss was the dogs. I'm such an animal person. And so we had shared 2 dogs together, and that was almost as hard, and at a lot of moments harder than losing the person because of who I am. But that's when I, plugged in and I wrote an article about, here's the pain and loss of the breakup. And if you lose animals through that, and that has been skyrocketing. Thousands of people have read that. Yeah.
What a great way, though. Isn't that's also part of being a sensitive and empathic, person, is that you can take it and you can write about it or talk about it. And it touches, your pain touches so many other people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's a gift coming out of it, Yeah.
Yeah, it's true. And I think, I got into the field of social work, and started this journey about 8 years ago, and seeing I want to be, that licensed clinical social worker, and for many reasons. And I would tell myself, if I only helped one person and really help them to, grow or to change their life in a positive way, that would all be worth it. And now that I've succeeded in so many areas and helped so many people, I kind of like, okay, if I help 100,000 people, then it'll be worth it. You kind of keep moving those expectations when you have to remember to be so grateful for what you have. And I quickly am one of those people that, nope, it's not enough. I need to do more. I need to be more. I need to try harder. Yeah.
Same here. I know. And that can be exhausting for other people. I always think about that in terms of a relationship, because a lot of people, like, I'm finding the whole idea of what a relationship is in terms of how we're told they're supposed to be based on movies, TV shows, society, Facebook, social media, that it's such a farce.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's so romanticized, right? And
Oh,
it's so,
yeah.
this is how it's supposed to be. And if you're in a relationship and you're not sure about if you're going to have a long lasting marriage or not, you should just leave because that's the only goal. So it's either, I was reading an article about this the other day. It's either a soul crushing breakup or marriage until you die. Like, wow, those are pretty extreme options. But it's really true. These expectations when life is messy and relationships are messy. I've been on a journey of, trying to understand when the intimacy, like the passion in the beginning of a relationship fades.
Mm-hmm.
What are the things that how do you process through with a healthy partner? And, what makes that love lasting and what does that look like? What's functional and dysfunctional? But, as with you, I'm a passionate person and that can get me into trouble because in relationships, I'm just as passionate. And for example, with my most recent ex, that was a really scary thing. And the more intimacy that occurred and the more steps that were taken to sort of solidify the relationship, from my perspective, she kind of started backing out because it was scary. And so what was my response? Pour more passion and try to hold on to someone that was backing up, and probably should have just backed off as well and let the pieces fall where they may. But I didn't know, looking back, you can kind of assess things a lot better. So it's that passion that can get me into trouble. And I've also had to learn it's okay to look for someone that can take that passion and appreciate it.
Yeah. Now, when you say the word passion, and you don't have to go into, of course, very, very intimate details, but however intimate you want to go. But when you say the word passion, what is that definition of your passion?
Yeah, good question. Kind of in the same line of courageous love. I don't spend a lot of time with people that don't go deep in conversation, that can't look at the stars and appreciate life, that explore themselves and are intimate with the messy parts of themselves and the good parts about themselves, because that's kind of what I do all day long, for better or for worse.
That's your job. Yeah, it's what you're attracted to doing. Exactly.
Yeah. And so in a relationship, I want to be with someone who you wake up and you make that choice every day, whether or not you have a marriage certificate, because in the long run, that doesn't mean anything.
Right.
Someone who is making a choice for you and that you're really looking out for their well-being. And I'm always thinking about ways of how to improve or how to change in the relationship and make it better. And sometimes can get frustrated with the status quo, and most days are mundane and I can struggle with that piece. But where that kind of is a negative influence in passion is when you lose yourself. And I had lost myself and had given up things that I enjoyed because I was trying to please someone any way that I could, but I didn't do it consciously. It just kind of happened.
Yeah, there's that, what I call enmeshment.
Yeah.
And that piece, has kept me from getting into relationships because I could feel, I really need to do a lot more work on myself and grounding myself and my own interests and having my own life, so that when I get into a relationship with someone, I don't follow what I've been told in every romantic movie I've ever seen. That you're just supposed to give up your entire being and it's all about this other person that's come into your life. That has been such hard, focused, purposeful work on my part, and to be totally okay with being alone, because I just don't believe anymore that belief that seems to be out there. Once you meet your right person, everything in your life is a dreamboat and that's the goal of every life. I don't believe that anymore. I believe the goal of your life is to know you, and then you meet another person who knows them, and then you continue to grow together, but also separately.
Yeah, that's powerful. And what you say kind of reminds me of conversations I have with individuals that are dying is, what was my legacy? What did I leave in the world? Will people remember me? And spending time thinking about what is your legacy. It's a choice and it's an option that you can create, whether you're 6, 16, 60, 90. You can work on that legacy. And that's also scary. Wait, you're saying that I have a say in what my legacy is?
Yeah.
And And there are many, many ways where, and I'm not talking legacy like being a millionaire or,
Right.
Being super successful, but what is the impact? I know a lot of, in this age range, a lot of my colleagues and friends are struggling because maybe they want to be married and they thought their legacy was going to be having a family. I thought that was my legacy for a long time. And sometimes our expectations can shift and we can work on a different legacy, but still hold that hope and that dream. It's really important to find that. And it surprises me, being a sensitive and vulnerable and empathetic person, that so many people are walking around without a sense of purpose, without an understanding of what they want to do or the legacy that they want to leave.
So how accepted are you amongst your other male friends with the fact that you are this, very sensitive, empathetic male?
That's a great, powerful question, and gives me the chance to be vulnerable. I don't have a lot of male friends. I think part of it is because, I identify as someone who does the best to be as understanding and to change the culture that we have as possible. I think I struggle because I know how the male mind can think and I know the assumptions. For example, something like catcalling is that males can do. It just makes me so angry that you would treat another person, in this case, a female, that way. And so I'm really conscious of how I present, and a lot of males rub me the wrong way. So between social work and horses and that, I have a lot of female friends. But with the males in my life, they're more understanding and accepting, but I wouldn't say I'm really close to that. That's something that I try to understand and work through as well. It just kind of comes with who I am. And most of my male friends are either husbands or boyfriends of the female who's my primary friend.
That's interesting. Well, the great thing about you becoming part of our podcast network is there's so many sensitive males on this network that the other day I looked and I went, oh my gosh, we have more male podcasters than we do female. I'm going to have to bump that up. So we're bringing on more. That wasn't planned. It's almost like, okay, here's a beacon for sensitive males, and they all flocked to this. So you'll end up making friends with some people on the network. That's what a lot of the males have said, that, oh my God, finally, I have these new friends that are males that are really sensitive.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great. I think a lot of times it can feel isolating because, again, you're not in the cultural standards, but, I can't really talk about that much because I'm really aware of power, privilege, and oppression. And, as an adjunct at the Graduate School of Social Work, I'm a white heterosexual male leading a classroom of 22 females. Right. And I try to reduce power as much as possible. Little ways, like I don't stand in front of the class, I sit and try to, pass that along. Even when I'm lecturing, I don't want to stand because that can say a lot. Sometimes it leads me to be rude because if I'm in an elevator and there's a single female in the elevator, I will push by them to leave first so they know that I'm not following them because I can see that fear and concern. Even with friends that I've had for years, I typically say, female friends, I say, can I give you a hug? And a lot of my friends are like, would you stop asking that question? And I say, no, because I'm not going to assume that I have a right to hug you.
God, who taught you to think this way?
I think social work and being in that, and a lot of my friends are females. And so the most valuable lessons in my life have been taught to me by females. And I'm in awe of respect. I don't think I could be a female. I think I would just cave and I would say, nope, can't do this. I'm going to check out. I don't think I could do it. I'm not strong enough. And I mean that. But to see, right now in the political spectrum, to see all the sexual assault and to see people coming out and speaking up, it's so powerful. And I'm trying to do more. I wish I had more male friends because I want to call them out and I want to educate. I was walking downtown with someone that I'm seeing right now, and behind us there were these two guys talking about, well, I waved at her and she didn't even wave back. Like, she should smile when I waved to her. And I just was seething and I missed an opportunity to educate. I didn't say anything. I didn't turn around and I didn't say, actually, I don't think that, just because you're a male, that this female has to smile or wave or do anything in response to your actions. but I didn't do it. And so it's why. And for me, it was feeling uncomfortable or feeling fear. Right. And I've got the power and the privilege in this. So that's something that I'm trying to work on and be more mindful.
That's interesting. And I love that we're talking about this too, because it's true. There are times to educate and there are times not to, for the same reasons that a female would or wouldn't educate. Because if it's a male who's very aggressive, you certainly don't want to get in a situation where he's going to then turn around and attack you either. For you saying, hey, blah, 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 blah. I had that happen with a friend of mine. He came down the street and he's probably, he's a good 10 years younger than I am. And these women were actually catcalling him because he's a very attractive male. And I was very uncomfortable and he was mortified. And as we kept walking, their car happened to stop in traffic and we were keep going and they kept catcalling. And I said, have y'all ever been catcalled? Did it make you feel comfortable? Because it doesn't make him feel comfortable either. And man, they just blasted me. And I thought, well, that's fascinating. And he and I ended up talking about it at lunch. And he said, yeah, that doesn't happen very often, but I know it happens to women all the time. He's very sensitive. And I said, yeah, I've dealt with it. I still, even at 47, I walked. I live in a very small town. My actual podcast studio is in a very small town. And I had to walk to go pick up my car that was being detailed. And I literally had to stop and think, do I want to walk down the main street? Because I don't want to I don't want someone to yell. And I told this to a friend of mine. And he said, Kristen, it's so fascinating. He's also a very sensitive male. He said, it's so fascinating because I would just leave and that thought would never enter my mind. So the fact that you have to think about that ahead of time. And sure enough, I did the walk and I took back roads and to avoid the catcall. And on the way back, I thought, you know what, I'm just going to take the straight route. And sure enough, I had a bunch of guys yelling. I don't know what they were yelling, but and it instantly made me uncomfortable. And I was like, damn it, I wish that we didn't have to deal with that kind of stuff, but we do. And people don't understand that.
I can't even imagine. I'm in the, I do run and, I take it for granted because I can run at 11 o'clock at night without fearing my safety. And I can run early in the morning and I can run in areas that are more rural and not fear for safety. But I have friends that are females that run and they say, nope, my running window is when it's light or I carry pepper spray or I have this taser on me or I really have to be conscious where and when I run. And typically their headphones are blasting because they don't want to hear the comments that they get. Which I'm like, wow, it just boggles my mind. Like I can't comprehend it, why you would do that and what motivates males to do that. But again, I think kind of ties into that cultural assumption that I'm a tough, aggressive male and this is my confidence and I'm like, has that ever been successful? Have you ever got a date for catcalling or does it just help your ego feel better?
And some of it's taught. I've had some men that they behaved deplorably in their past and that's how they were raised. My ex-husband's one of them. He didn't catcall and things like that, but he did some other things, behaviors about women that were not fantastic. And that's how he was raised. And then the minute that we got together, I was like, no, that is not okay. And now, of course, he would never. And he's one of the biggest feminists I know. But some of them, are dealing with that's how they taught it was okay to be. And they really don't understand, just how profoundly hurtful that behavior is. So it's nice to hear that you think of this on the other side of things, other than some of the men that I've talked to recently. Well, I'm just never going to, believe me, I'm never going to hug a woman again. It's just not going to happen. I think that's taking it to a ridiculous, you're still blaming women for bad behavior from males in the past by even making that statement. Even if you're a male that's never behaved that way, you're still putting the blame of assault on the women who've been assaulted by saying that.
Right.
And they don't get it.
Right. Absolutely. and trying to make yourself into this pretend victim. Well, fine, I'll never hug them. And that's not the right way to go about it. And, I guess I'm really honored because I have some really strong, beautiful, independent, powerful women in my life and friends that have befriended me and been vulnerable about sexual assaults or, what they've gone through, but also friends that are powerful enough that when one of my, microaggressions come through or I make a statement that's triggering to them, they call me out on it. And so it's always educational and it's always a piece because we all have microaggressions. We have things that we, that come up and sometimes it's just normalized in behavior and sometimes it's not. But I have these powerful friends that have been surrounding me that have been helping to educate me. And I can never take that for granted. And even, being out and dating as a male, I'm constantly not taking for granted. It's a lot scarier a lot of times for a female to meet someone that they've never met. Where's the location? Is it night or is it day?
Right.
Do I have a safety plan? Do I have a friend that knows where I am when I take it for granted and I just show up? So, there's a lot there.
Yeah, that's very true. Well, it shows, to your sensitivity that you do that. And believe me, I have had to look at my own behavior, being the age that I am and that I spent 20 years in the technology field, which is, heavily male dominated. I mean, I was so many times the only woman in the room for these big meetings. And I had a million different things happen that were so uncomfortable. And some of the ways that I learned how to fit in with the boys are ways that would be totally inappropriate now. So this whole Me Too movement has made me look even at my own behavior and go, okay, I know that you did those things as a coping mechanism to fit in the best you could during that time, but those ways of being are now totally inappropriate of me. Mm-hmm. So I've had to take this and call myself, and hold myself accountable for my behavior too, and not say, oh, well, not just blame it all on the men. Well, it's their fault that I had to behave this way. Okay, well, that's fine. There's a way to look at that, but it doesn't mean that it's okay for me to keep doing that.
Yeah, no, yeah. And it's powerful. It does go both ways, but I'm even trying to be careful how I say what I'm thinking and, express it. So it comes out, how I mean it too, because a lot of times it can be misinterpreted as well. So
yes, absolutely.
But yeah, I'm the same way in the opposite spectrum where I walk into a room and there's 22 females and I'm the only guy and I think nothing of it anymore. But it's interesting. Sometimes it's threatening for partners that I'm with. Who's this girl texting you? Who's this girl texting you? Who's this one? And I'm like, well, all right, friends. Let's talk about that.
Oh, that's fascinating. So let's talk about that for a minute. And then we'll talk about animals on the mind. So because I have another friend, I'm friends with so many very sensitive males. I love it. And I'm one of their very close girlfriends. And there have been situations, like there was a situation where I was hanging out with a friend. I'm friends with him and his girlfriend was really uncomfortable. We hadn't really met. And I was at his house and we were hanging out and I didn't want to drive home. I just wanted to stay the night on the couch and she wasn't happy about it. And I was like, girlfriend, I get it. I'm out. I do not, this is your house. I do not want you to be uncomfortable. And so I left because there's never anything that's going to go on other than friendship with this person. But it was really interesting for me having so many male friends. Like it sounds like you have so many female friends. I have so many male friends. I understand what you're saying, that dynamic. And it's an interesting tap dance, isn't it?
It is, yeah. I think my last partner, she was not really the jealous type, but I think it was more that she just didn't care, in my opinion. And I could be completely wrong in that. So it wasn't threatening. But now that I'm kind of in the, looking again and seeing someone casually, there's been comments about, who's that or who's that, or you went out with this person, trying to assess, like, was this a date? What's the relationship? And I take it for granted because I'll text my friends and single female friends and say, hey, let's go out on a friend date. Let's go do this thing that would be very dating like if it were to be labeled as that, but,
Right.
strictly platonic. And then, also run into struggles where, God, quote unquote friend zone. That's a horrible terminology, but where you might want it to move differently. But I'm always very careful, and I'm in the past been more shy to say, do you want this to change, or what does that look like? But always, it's so important to communicate and not make assumptions. So, with partners that I'm with, it's a balance of understanding where they're coming from and that jealousy piece. And we all have some jealousy.
Yeah.
But where does it stem from? Is it insecurity? Is it controlling? Is it narcissism? What is that? And so it's really an assessment for me, and people that I'm with have to understand that this is just part of my dynamic, and trust that over time. But yeah, it's always a balance, always learning, always shifting.
It is. I actually asked a friend of mine. I didn't know why he was always coming to visit me, because we live in different states, and he's always coming to visit and hanging out, and nothing was going on with, but we don't communicate in between those visits. It's an odd relationship. And so I finally said, okay, is this a romantic thing or is it not? Because I kind of need to know. And those conversations are interesting too when you're someone that has a lot of male friendships. Because I'd bring up, oh, my friend Jeff, or oh, blah, blah, blah. And he'd go, who's that? And I thought, well, that belays a bit of like, you're possibly interested. And in the end, he said, no, he really isn't. So there was a lot of weirdness going on. And that relationship, I just immediately work zoned it, because there was just too much inability to have an honest conversation about what's going on. But yeah, it's so interesting to be in those, winding our way through those relationship dynamics, friends or more or whatever.
And then it's hard to have those discussions. So, for you to even broach that, because back to Brene Brown and the power of vulnerability, then I've got one of two options. If I know the answer, I can then, if it's no, I have to decide, do I want to still be their friend, or do I want to try to keep pursuing this romantically, even though they've given me the direct answer? So you kind of come to a crossroads. And for some people, it's easy to just ignore that and quote unquote see what develops. And then you get yourself into trouble. For me, because I'm sensitive and empathetic, there's a lot of females that I hear them just complaining that there's no good guys and no one's available. And I'm sitting here scratching my head like, hello. I'm not going to be insulted right now.
Sitting right next to you. Yeah, right.
And I've been pursuing you for months, and I want more for months. And then you're just, complaining to me that you can't find a good guy. And I won't ever take that space for granted, because that means that we have an emotional connection, that they feel comfortable. And I can kind of talk to them maybe from a male side of what it looks like. But it also has gotten me into a lot of pain where I might want it to go romantically, and this person is like, oh, I don't, I can't lose the safety of this friendship for that.
Yeah, and there are people too, like me, that I found out that finally I went through enough life lessons to get this out of my system. But because every interaction that I had with males growing up, other than two, were with males that either high spectrum narcissist, psychopaths, sociopaths. So I really I equated love with that kind of abusive behavior. So I know that there are so many men that were my wonderful friends that I completely never looked at. They weren't exciting to me in any way, shape, or form. I could not have fallen for them because they weren't some kind of sociopath. Yeah,
that's a powerful statement. I'm not going to even touch that right now.
Yeah, and a lot of women and men have that, have that problem, and you have to really work on yourself. I mean, I had a therapist say to me, "Okay, are you going to be able to, get in a relationship with someone that it isn't dramatic, unhealthy, and toxic? Are they gonna is that gonna be too unexciting for you?" And that was a few years it took me to work on, work on that one. So there's that comes into play also.
Yeah, well, I don't know how many times I've heard from people that I'm, trying to figure out, is this friendship? Is this more the response? Well, I'm into bad boys, or I'm into muscle men. In my mind, I go, so you like being treated poorly, and you're beating yourself up through that? I'm like, I don't say that, but I think that. And I had a recent interaction with an individual who was really honest and was saying that they were looking for somebody, with passion and with drive, but different, and basically that isn't me. And I'm like, wait, what? But I have passion and drive. And then they said, well, I just like really, tall hunk muscle men. And I'm thinking, okay, where has that gotten you so far? But we were able to communicate that. And, I now I've grown enough where before an interaction like that might make me feel like, oh, everything's great until the physical and nobody wants me that way or this and that, when it's just not true, that those are the negative messages that have been told to me over my lifetime.
Yes.
And I'm like, well, then I had to decide, do I still find value in spending time with this person as a friend and not expecting anything else? Because the problem that I feel most males run into is if they've been given this boundary of, I just really want this to be friends, and then they keep pushing the boundary every second they get.
Right.
But to me, if I get a definitive answer, then I know my boundaries and I can either choose to stay in it, or if it's too hard for me, sometimes I have to leave and say, I will always want more. I can't engage in this because it's not fair to either of us. But that's hard because then the decision is you lose a potential friend. So
yes. And also there's that place too where you can get to where you just don't, where it's, my gosh, it's okay to not be looking for a romantic person. And that's where I'm at. I am not in a space where I want that in my life. I've got a lot going on. If that changes, that's fine. I certainly welcome it. I'm not closed off to it, but I'm not constantly looking. When I sit down with an interesting male that I find attractive, the last thing on my mind is, how can I turn this into a romantic thing? Because that's just not on my radar right now. And that has been so freeing for me to be at that place. But here's what I have that's different. I'm older. I've already had a child. I've already been in a long-term loving relationship with someone I'm still very good friends with now, who's the father of my child. So I've done a lot of those milestones that are reasons why you get into a relationship. Well, you want to have children. Well, you want to get married. I've done that stuff. So now I can just focus on, I just want to work on myself and my issues and learn new good things about myself and focus on my company. And that's just not on my radar. And that's very freeing.
Yeah, I mean, I can't even imagine. And I appreciate you saying that because, I have friends that adopted moms everywhere and mentors and people that really give me a lot of guidance. And I heard a lot of, just don't let the timeline push you. Don't make decisions out of fear that you're getting older. And, as I said, the late 20s, early 30s, a lot of the dating scene, especially what I'm seeing for females who want a family, it feels like a lot of pressure.
Yes.
And, I can't deny the fact that I want children and I want to have a family and I want to experience that. And so I was kind of putting professionalism on hold and just sitting and waiting for it to happen and jumping at the first person to look at me and desperately wanting something when I realized I can't put my life on hold. And even though it's harder and I'm not where I maybe want to be right now, to not put so much pressure on that time frame. And with my birthday coming up this month, I'm thinking about this and evaluating, and man, I thought I would have 2 kids and a white picket fence and a golden retriever and da 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 da. When I'm really, massively in debt in an apartment, it's fine. It's totally fine.
Yeah,
But
you have school loans out the wazoo, I am sure.
Oh, yeah. But it's all okay. And, there's a lot of things I can be grateful for. And I have great relationships and I have so much to be thankful for. But yeah, you're right. It's that pressure. So I appreciate you saying, well, I've accomplished these things. And so I have a piece of that where I'm kind of like, oh, man, like, when is my time that it's never going to happen again?
Yeah, exactly. And to get to a place too where last year I had a mini love affair with someone that was way younger than me, at least a decade younger than I am. And it was short-lived. And we knew it would be short-lived. And I knew that he wanted to get married again and that was never going to happen because he lives in New Zealand. So it was not going to happen. He's not moving. I wasn't moving. But it was so nice to just have this really deep friendship and love affair that we both knew wasn't going to turn into anything more. And there was no pain around the exit he's married
Wow.
now, and I love his
Wow.
new spouse. And it was like, wow, this is great about being an older woman who's had the kids and this and that, because I can go have this affair with someone that I really was attracted to, and he was so attracted to me, and we could just let it be that for a very short time and then move on to other things.
Move on and not be so worried about the timeline, of
Exactly.
That's amazing. Yeah. And well, and it's so complicated and, a little natural segue. That's why I like animals so much.
Right. Let's spend the last couple minutes talking about that, because your show is going to be a lot about that. So tell our listeners, what you want to do with your show and why you chose working with animals, why that speaks to you.
Yeah. So I'll start with kind of the second piece first, but I think animals show this, just this pure relationship with us. It isn't as complicated when we come home and our dog jumps up and we're mini celebrities. They show us this unconditional love. And, I'm a horse guy. I just love how majestic they are, and just working with horses, this huge sentient being that has such personality, and you build a partnership based on trust, and you grow as a person so much in relation to that being, and they can be good mirrors. If I'm anxious, my horse is going to be a lot more fidgety. So I'm really excited about what's going to come for this podcast. Really, Animals on the Mind, so that's kind of the name of it, is going to be focused on why do animals impact us so much? Why do we look at those YouTube videos of kittens and puppies and it makes us feel happy?
Yes.
What is going on? What is that?
Love. That's the biggest thing.
Well, absolutely. And that, oxytocin release that happens. And so going to just be interviewing different animal professionals, from behavioralists to animal ethicists to psychologists to animal assisted social workers to, those that rely on service animals, and talk about the whole spectrum of how are our lives shaped and formed by animals. I know some people that have written children's books that are focused around animals, and why are those so integral to our upbringing, all the way to the spectrum of how is it that someone can form a hate of animals and animal abuse and all of that. So Animals on the Mind is going to be an overview of the impact of animals, from dogs to chickens to rats to horses to parrots, and how that influences us. And I'm really excited to see it come to fruition. And
Me too. I'm so glad we met, because we met, I guess it's been a couple years now, hasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. We met at the conference that the theme was, kind of animals on the mind and the biological connection and how it impacts us.
Yep. And when you sat down to do your interview, I was like, I always get an empathic hit with someone. I remember thinking, ooh, I'm going to end up being friends with this person somehow. And now I can see why, because you're friends with a lot of women.
Well, I had the same kind of thought process. I'm like, I really like that human. I need to keep in contact. I need to keep checking in. So I'm excited. And what you've done with the network is so powerful, and have touched so many people. So I'm really honored to have a space in that.
Well, thank you. I just want to make sure our listeners know it is called Animals on the Mind, and we're going to be launching probably January of 2018.
That's the goal, the new year and
Awesome.
and that new podcast. So yeah.
Awesome. Well, tell our listeners the other places they can find out more about you.
Yeah. Right now, primarily, it's through Pet Loss Education Project. So if you type that into Facebook, it's Pet Loss Education Project. You can shoot me an email directly. It's actually adam@lovelosstransition.com, which is kind of an offshoot of that. And I would love to talk and to connect if you have any questions or that kind of piece.
And they can read your articles on Psychology Today just by typing in your first and last name, or?
Yeah, so it's called the column is called Animal Attachment. If you go to Psychology Today, you can either type in Animal Attachment or my name, and it should pop right up. Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. It's really appreciated.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. It's been great.
Of course. And thank you to our listeners for another edition of Mental Health News Radio.
Get ready for it because here it comes. But first, thank you again to our sponsors like EverythingEHR.com, devoted to helping organizations finding the best electronic health record in behavioral health, and Service Dogs by Warren Retrievers, SDWR.org, a nonprofit organization that provides service dogs to those with unique abilities and invisible diseases, to include autism, diabetes, epilepsy, and PTSD. Until there's a cure, there's a dog. And hey, an SDWR service dog is at work every day with one of our own team members. If you have a question, visit us at mentalhealthnewsradio.com or our network of podcasters at mhnrnetwork.com. Disruptors, healers, technologists, advocates, and most importantly, voices to be heard from all corners of the globe. Thank you so much for joining us.
And now a final word from our therapy dog, Miles.
Good boy.